we all have to write in what we do, and even if you do engage a website copywriter or a copywriter to do other collateral for your business, there will always be times you need to do the writing yourself. And also a lot of what I hope that what I share today will also be useful if you are engaging a copywriter. So a lot of it is about really understanding your business, understanding how to talk about your business. So hopefully it will be very useful. I've worked with a couple of people in the room, which is really nice to see faces that I've perhaps only met on Zoom. So that's really exciting as well. So I guess I should have followed up Anita and just acknowledged the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. And I also acknowledge the Paramonk and Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work. So, sad to sensational. Let's see if we can do that. So, let's just see if I can also get my slides to work. Yay! So a little bit about me. I am a former diplomat, as Anita mentioned in the lovely introduction. And I moved to the Barossa almost 9 years ago, which is kind of hard to believe. And when I first arrived here, I was actually, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I wanted to start a new career. I actually started doing some work through the B2B program very early on as a trade consultant. And then I went on to work for a small winemaker and kind of fell into copywriting through blog writing. And I wrote a blog about my son's photoshopped teeth, which I've talked about in previous presentations. And from that kind of got into copywriting because I realised it was a great way to connect with other businesses, to share their stories. And so I started initially, I had a tourism client in Italy until March 2020, and we all know where that went. And my first big project I guess I worked on was a big government project where we also rewrote all the travel advice, which we finished at the end of 2019. So, you know, I'm not sure where all that travel advice is up to now. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. From there, I've worked with a range of businesses, both here in the Barossa, across Australia and overseas. And it's a pretty broad range, so I don't niche in any particular type of industry. Pretty much, you know, it doesn't matter what it is. I'm often a client of those businesses or I'm a potential customer, so I look at it from that perspective. And I'm also just an inherently curious person who likes to find stuff out. So I've worked with rural finance brokers, HR professionals, wine companies, online stores, bricks and mortar stores, coaches, bookkeepers, consultants and real estate tourism. So as a B2B provider, I've got a fairly, you know, in the time that you've got, we've done a few different things. So Austin up the back, who's launched a new business, if you've got, if you want to go and do laser tag, he's your person to talk to, because I had so much fun working with Austin and writing some words for his business. So we came up with basically an introduction that he can use. Sometimes it'll be looking at a simple website review, which we did as well. For other people, it might be working out a blog strategy for you, a newsletter, working out setting up your mailing list, and a welcome email sequence or other marketing materials. So it's a pretty broad range of things, but generally I now focus on website copywriting. These are generally the 8 things that I think are fairly key, whether you're writing your own copy, whether you're working with a copywriter, because these will be the things that we will ask you about. Even if you're outsourcing, you still really need to know all of this. I often say to potential clients or clients when I'm working with them, I would love to be a mind reader, but I would have to charge a hell of a lot more. So part of the copywriting process is lots of conversation and briefing at the beginning where we can go through all of this. So knowing your customer, being clear on what your message and your goal is, making the copy easy to read, we'll talk about that, using clear, active language, avoiding acronyms and jargon. So, you know, you might know the words that you're using or the acronyms you're using in your business, but does a potential customer coming to that website know what that's going to mean straight away? Be conversational. I think, you know, there's a lot of professional services in the room, and I think I came from a government background, and I look at my first website now and it's kind of horrific. I should probably have it up here as an example. But this need to be professional and thinking that in being professional, you can't be conversational. So you can, so that's the good news. Putting the customer at the centre of your copy. I think this is really, really important. Too often with businesses, it's we do this, we do that. So we need to flip it around. I'm going to touch very briefly on keywords and search engine optimization. I'm not even going to attempt to go into the detail. I did a course that I can give people the details, anyone that's really super interested in it, but let me say it's about 3 months of some fairly committed study, and it's one of those things that's ongoing. So I've also got a little freebie course that I can give you the link to that, you know, if you want to find out a little bit more. And finally, edit and proofread your copy and check your links. Now, I can also guarantee there will be a typo in today's presentation because I didn't actually follow my own advice and no one else has checked this for me. So what is copywriting to start with? I think when I first came across it, I think it was all about advertising copy. And I think that's what we traditionally thought of. So the sort of madman era of advertising. But it's just generally writing words for promotion and marketing. And it can include a huge range of things. So your ads, whether that be print, perhaps for the local paper or a flyer, it can be your online ads, press releases, brochures, websites, emails, white papers, case studies, video scripts, your LinkedIn profile, Facebook updates, or blogs. So there's a huge number of things that we can cover, and you'll find that some copywriters might focus on a particular industry. So I have a couple of colleagues who are medical copywriters or real estate copywriters, and they'll deal with everything in that industry. I've kind of gone the other way, and I tend to focusing on website copy, sales page copy and blogs. I do a couple of other things occasionally, but for any industry. So I guess today I wanted to go through some of the common misconceptions about writing for your website, the words that you put on there. And as I said, I really don't want you to walk away from this going, wow, that's too hard. I can't possibly write my own copy. I'm not going to do anything. I think websites, and I've got a slide in here as well that goes into this, they evolve and they change. So when you're starting out, it might be a case of taking hopefully the advice you've gotten today and being able to write some copy for yourself. As your business evolves and you get busier, that's when it might be a chance to go, right, you know what, I need to actually invest in somebody else coming and writing my copy, because you're weighing up the time that you could be spending, you know, running your business and doing what you do best and letting someone else do the writing. The other thing is, it's often really hard to write about ourselves. I had to put a bio together for Anita, and it's just lucky I now have a few versions of it, because the first time I went to do it, I think any one of us who's had to write a bio, it's really, really hard. Same with things like award writing. It's really, really hard to actually sit there and go, hey, I'm really great. And that's sometimes where having a copywriter can really help. This is a favourite one of mine, and I share it a lot. I'm not sure how clear it is from there, but one of the biggest misconceptions I find is, that's fine, I've paid for my website, I don't understand tech, so I'm going to pay for that, but that's all right. Once I've got the website, I'll just fill in the gaps. It's just like filling in a template, and I'll just chuck in some words, and that'll be fine. And I appreciate when you're starting out, there are budget constraints. So I want to give you some tips to make sure you're not just filling your beautiful new website with crappy copy, or as I say, they're building a beautiful new house and then just having cardboard furniture. I think my original analogy was actually milk crate furniture. I don't know whether anyone lived in a share house like I did, but all of our furniture was milk crates that we found. You know, do all sorts of things with milk crates to make furniture. And there's so many ways to get around, you know, not necessarily having to outsource that whole website. And obviously the technical side of your website is super, super important as well. Because again, it's not just a case of throwing something up there and hoping it will work. As I'll touch on later, getting found online is about having the right website, which Justin is obviously, you know, one of the people that you can talk to. So this is one of my other favourite things. I think we all think we can write because we wrote when we were in school. You know, we've all written essays, so we're like, well, that's fine, we can write. But the reality is you wouldn't open an Italian restaurant after making pasta a few times. So, you know, why would you write your own website if you've just written a few stories in year 9? But again, bootstrapping is part of it. It's part of starting out. It's part of the journey of starting a business. So there are ways to get around it. Now, Justin, please don't be offended by this next one. But my website looks pretty. I've seen so many pretty websites. They're really lovely. They're designed really well. Got beautiful photos. The copy on it is terrible, or there isn't any copy. So I can see all these pretty photos and I get to the homepage and I'm like, but I don't know what you do. I'm not quite clear what that photo actually is, or I can't navigate around it. Or it looks great on my web browser when I'm sitting at my computer, but then I try and use it on my phone. And I don't know about you guys, but I do a lot of my searching on my phone. So that's something to bear in mind, is you've really got to balance that out, because having a beautiful website without that great copy, you're kind of selling yourself short. One of the other misconceptions is, well, all my customers are on social media. I've got all these followers. This is where I chat to people. This is where my people are. And that's great. Like, I'm a big believer in social media. I think it's how we interact. It's really, really important. But you should be using it to send people to your website and to your mailing list. So social media, think of social media as the door, and your website is your house or your business. So you should be keeping, because while those customers are on social media, it's kind of like building your house on someone else's land. We've all heard those stories of businesses that have either lost their Instagram account because they've been hacked, or Instagram's decided they've done something really naughty, and suddenly there's, there are thousands or tens of thousands of followers that they've lost, and they don't have them anywhere else. So ultimately, use your Instagram and your social media to be driving people back to your website and also to your mailing list, so that you're in charge of those. Because the reality is, as great as all of those platforms are, they're not actually ours. Why is copywriting so important? Well, without well-written, search engine optimized copy, your website's not really working. No one's going to be reading it, because it might be up there, but if you haven't chosen some keywords that your clients are searching for, how are they finding you? Sure, you might have put your website on your business card or on a flyer, or you've told people about it, but really you do need some other things, and you need your copy. Good copywriting is super important, because it's how Google and your customers find you. And that's probably the most important thing. So starting out, it mightn't be as important because you're building up your brand. But as you start building that business and really starting to compete, people are going to be looking for you. And I challenge everyone to just do a quick Google on a couple of things, and hopefully you come up as your brand or your name. But where do you come up when it comes to the service you provide with others? Are you connecting with the right customers? Now, I think this is really, really important. How many of you have a website that is actually selling for you? And I know sometimes selling sort of sounds a bit like a dirty word, but I mean, ultimately that's what it's there for. How often are you getting calls from potential clients that are just not the right clients? So they don't have the funds to actually invest in what you're doing, or to pay for your service, or to buy your product, or they're just the wrong people. They think they need someone to help them build a house, but maybe they need an architect first. Whether you're going to outsource your website copy or do it yourself, I think it's really just important to understand the process. So that's kind of what we're going to go through today. So firstly, who is your customer? And this is really, really important. It's probably, to me, I think it's one of the foundations, and I think it's important whether you're dealing with a service provider about your branding and what it looks like, building your website, writing your copy, and who they are. We really want to be able to connect with who that person is and really focus on it. And I know starting out, it's like, well, my customer's anyone who wants my service. I'll take anyone with a pulse and a credit card. And I say that because that's how I was when I first started out. And the problem with that is, if you're trying to appeal to everyone, your copy will be so bland and your brand will be so bland that it won't appeal to anyone. So often when we start thinking about who our customers are, we do that sort of, demographics, their name, their age, where they live, number of pets, what they do. But it's more than that. Obviously, that's really useful, and at least thinking about, particularly if you're looking at a particular geographic area, that's useful. But a more useful thing to look at is what's the problem they've got and how are you helping them? How can you solve it and how can you help? So rather than worrying about what age they are or whether they're married with 2 kids, what is it the problem and what's the service or the product that you provide that can really help them? The next one, and this is something I always ask in my briefing, and sometimes it's a bit hard, and particularly when you're starting out, but looking at their beliefs, their fears, and their desires. So whether that's their preconceived beliefs about your brand or your service or your product. What are they worried about? What are their fears? So often it will be, you're too expensive, or you won't understand what I do, or I've never worked with that sort of service provider before. I've never bought that product. So they're nervous about that. How can you understand that and make sure that your copy addresses that? And what are their deepest desires? What do they really want? And again, this comes back to the problem that you're solving for them. But what is it they want? Do they, we all want to feel, I guess, successful and loved and all of those things. So, what is it that they're looking for? Depending on how many pages your website has, you want a clear goal for every page. So as an example, I think starting out, most businesses will start with a 3-page website. So you might have your home page. And I always describe your home page as a bit like a magazine cover. It's a bit of a snapshot. So who you are and what you do, who you do it for, a little bit more about the services, and a bit more about who you are or who your business is. Then you might go into your about and a little bit more, not just that isn't your chance to tell your full life story and you've got 3 cats and you like playing hockey. That's a chance for you to say, this is what our business does and this is how we help you. And then talk a little bit about your team. And then obviously your services. The other thing is, how do you want them to feel when they read each page? Because each page should have that really specific goal. And more importantly, what do you want them to do at the end of every page? And I think this is something that can be a real challenge with websites is you're reading it, you're on there, but you're like, well, what do I do next? Where am I going next? And I'm sure this is something that Justin works with his clients to make sure that as you're reading a website page, you know what you need to do next. And we kind of need to tell people. So we either want them to click on it to buy now, to learn more, to sign up, to click on something, to contact us. So on your website, on every page, it should be really clear what they're going to do next. We've got to make the copy really easy to read. And there's so many reasons for this. One is the fact that we are reading it on this. So all those long sentences and those paragraphs and the words that we shoved in everywhere to get the word count when we were at school or uni, that was fine on an A4 document. But as I said before, most of us are using these. So Google estimates that about 60% of people are using their accessing their websites on a mobile phone or a tablet. So we don't want really long sentences. The other thing we have to really consider is accessibility and how people are actually using our website. So are they using a screen reader? Is English their first language? Can we make it clearer so that people can actually read the copy? So these are just a couple of points, and this is probably, I'd say, for anything that you're writing, but it's, this is probably a little bit straightforward. But, making it really clear, the heading, the subheading, using bullet points, using white space. It doesn't have to be lots and lots of copy. And part of this, apart from accessibility, is I think we've all got really short attention spans these days. So we want to be able to scan the copy. We want to actually be able to scan each page and find out whether it's the right page that we need. I'm going to share a tool later on, and I'll caveat that with saying sometimes it makes it sound a little bit choppy. So you do need a mixture of it. But again, it's like having a conversation. And then breaking up your text so it's more interesting. So, there's so many things that we can do, and there's so many great tools that even if you're not, the world's best graphic designer, or, you can put some images in, put some quotes in, use those testimonials that your clients have spoken about. Use a GIF or a video. A video on your homepage, even if you're not at the point where you've been able to outsource it and have it done professionally, at least gives the people a chance to know who you are. They've heard your voice. And again, for those of us that are solo operators, that's super important because they're working with us and they're investing in us. Now, what's your language? Now, this isn't just about swearing. I mentioned it before, but be clear and avoid acronyms. It's all right to contract words. So once upon a time we have not, you can say haven't. It isn't about saying, hey mate, how you going kind of thing. It's not about, trashy language, I guess, for want of a better word, but it's just about having a conversation with people, using words that people are understanding, particularly if it's a service they've never used before. So try and use the words that your customers are going to understand rather than the words you might use within your business. Now, there's lots of great tools. I've just given an example. This is a free tool called Hemingway, which is super useful, and I recommend it. A friend of mine actually put some government speak through it recently, and it was kind of horrific. I've done some government projects in the last few years, and the general reading age that government websites, as they're being updated for, is about grade 7 or 8. If you can get it lower than that, that's great. Now, that doesn't mean you're speaking as if you're speaking to a child, but it means about taking out words that are unnecessary, that you don't need in there. So you can see the pink there, that's basically saying this is a really long sentence and no one's going to get to it. So maybe you could actually, maybe that could be bullet points. Words that can be simpler. So, you don't need to say utilise, you could say help. Try to keep the words active instead of passive voices. So again, as I said, this is only a tool. So this is Hemingway, this is free. There's another one called Grammarly that also has a free version. Another one called Pro Writing Aid. And particularly if you're writing a lot or you're writing blog posts, they're really worthwhile to just run your copy through it. And look, sometimes there'll be words in there, it's like, well, that's just a word we use. And, I'm just looking at the vets over there. There'll be sort of, I guess there's probably, it'll come up and say, well, this is really complicated. But I imagine, that's part of telling a pet owner, what's going on with their pet, and they'll understand that. So you've sort of got to make some judgments. And again, it's a bit of a tool. Now, this is the slide I almost forgot. I almost forgot to mention AI. Who in the room has heard of ChatGPT, other tools like that? So they've been around for ages. There's actually been loads of AI writing tools, but ChatGPT seemed to get a lot of coverage at the beginning of this year, and there were lots of copywriters like, oh my goodness, my world's been taken, the robots are coming, jobs being taken over. But I've got a different view on it. And the reality is, at the moment, the free version of ChatGPT Chat GPT, that's really hard to say with only half a coffee, only takes information from the web up to about 2021. So if you ask it anything current, it can't really do it. It also sounds a bit over-explained. I think the term we use, and apologies to the men in the room, but mansplaining. But it's a tool, and it's really useful for gathering ideas, for summarising really long articles, for doing some research. So for example, if you're looking for a blog post to write about your business and looking at, well, what would be some of the questions that my potential customers or clients are asking for, you could do a search. So I'll just go to the vet. It could be, what are the 10 most asked questions about cat health for indoor cats? And it will give you some ideas. And there are ways to actually, add some bits into it, so it will actually give you some links and some research sources, so you can go back and check those. But it's really useful. It's also great if you're dealing with the blank page. You need to write something, you need to explain a particular service. Just use it as a starting point. But that's not the end of it. So like any of these things, it's a tool. It's not, it's not the solution. I've already touched on this, but be conversational. You don't have to sound, even for our lawyers in the room, we don't have to sound formal. We can still be really professional and give our clients confidence while still having a conversation with them. We don't have to sound stuffy and really formal and over-explained or long sentences. Ultimately, you want to tell a story. And you want to tell a story that puts the customer at the centre of that. That what does it mean for them? And this is where obviously your testimonials or the previous clients you've worked with, case studies, explaining how you actually help them. So what was the situation that happened with one of your previous clients? What was the problem they had and how you actually solved them? And I think that's really important, to be able to sort of have that engaging conversation. Again, focus on how you can help. Now this is the big one, the wee test. I'm horrified when I look back at my previous consulting website, because it said, and we do this, and we do this, and we have this experience, and we. What was worse was, it was me, it was I, but I thought if I said we, I might sound a little bit more professional. But it's not about the client. So you want to ask them, what's the problem that you have? You're worried about selling a house, or you're worried about, starting a business and setting up the legal requirements. You're worried about investing with a copywriter. You're not sure what this means. So trying to actually turn it around and speak to your client and ask them questions. Then you can say things like, we can help, or I can help. But they don't really want to hear about your life story. Now, as I said, not going to. It's also, I'm pretty sure everyone's only had one coffee, and it's too early. But search engine optimization is super important. It's how you get found online, and it's also lots and lots of things. I've just included some of them. So it's how your website is built. It's the content on it. It's a lot of the technical things. It's finding the right keywords. It's getting backlinks, and good backlinks, not dodgy ones. But writing for, whether it's listing in a directory. I think we're really lucky here in the Barossa that we have a couple of really good directories we can list in. That sends another signal to Google, hey, this is a legitimate business. It's connecting with other businesses and perhaps offering to write a blog post, or getting a group of businesses together and writing a bit of a collaborative post and then all sharing it. Keywords are really quite fun. They're a whole business in themselves. I have one copywriting friend who that's basically all she does. And there are lots of tools, again, to use them and to understand what are they searching for? So this was something Austin and I talked about. It mightn't just be mobile laser tag. It might be activities for teenagers' birthdays, mobile corporate retreat of activities. So it's really looking, and that's where Google itself is a great option. There's lots of ways and there's lots of free tools that you can use to type in and see what it is people are actually searching for, what it is that you do. And again, it comes back to not just what you think your business does, but how do your customers look for that? What is it they're actually looking for? And this again goes back to right at the beginning, really understanding what it is they're looking for. Because it mightn't be copywriter in the Barossa. It might be words for my website, or it might be I need a blog written. So it's really understanding, again, really going back and understanding your customer. That said, we write for our audience, our potential clients and customers first, and then we write for Google. So we don't do, this is an example of what we call keyword stuffing. So someone's gone for best laptops, and it's just, they keep saying it. And you will have seen that, and it's quite often where you see where people are trying to target a local area. So it might be painter in Tanunda. And we're the best painter in Tanunda, and all it says all through is painter in Tanunda, painter in Tanunda. And so, yes, it might rank for that, but Google started actually penalising that. And that's the other thing. We don't actually know what Google looks at. It's hundreds of things that it actually looks at, and it keeps changing. But one of the things, it's not just looking about how many times you've written that one keyword in there. And it's not great to read, and it often doesn't actually make sense. So, I'll share this, and I would write this down, but even if you Google free SEO nibbles. So when I do my B2B consultations, this is one of the things I share in the consultation. It's a free course. It's 3 emails in 3 days, and it will just give you the basics so that if you are talking with a copywriter or a web developer and they start talking about SEO or search engine optimization, you'll actually understand what they're talking about. Finally, I just wanted to talk about checking your copy. And ideally, you get someone else to proofread it. So I have a couple of people that proofread particularly my clients' work, because the other thing is when you've been working with a client for 2 weeks writing their website and you've written 2 or 3 versions of it and you've gone back, you kind of start to miss the detail. So I always have, I've got a couple of people I use who can go through, and because they haven't looked at it, they haven't been involved in it, they're almost like that ideal client that they're like, hang on a minute, you guys might have thought this sounded great, you've been working on it, maybe it's some sort of quirky description that actually doesn't make sense, and by the way, you've got a typo. Now, there are a couple of ways to do it. Ideally, give yourself time to come back and edit your copy. I think that's one of the biggest things, is to actually sit on it and be able to come back and check it. Ideally, get someone else to proofread it, but if that doesn't work, the other thing I would say is the voice. I don't know whether anyone here has used the voice function on Word. I mean, it's pretty awful to listen to, but it's a great way to actually get a sense of how it actually sounds and whether it makes sense. And look, if you do have a mistake, just own it, because I think everyone does it. Don't try and gloss over it. It's not the end of the world. We've all had to come back and, change things. And at the end of the day, we're kind of humans. So, well, we are. Now, this is the most important thing, I think, to remember, is your website's not written in stone. It's not something you put up and you go, right, done, tick, that job's done. I can go back onto doing other things. It's something that will keep being updated. And so whether you're adding new services, whether you're updating blogs, whether you've got a new team member that you want to describe, whether it's just updating and adding in the latest testimonial that you've gotten from a client, or an award that you've won. There's all sorts of things that you can keep adding to your website, and you'll tinker with the copy. And every so often you'll get to a point you're like, okay, I'll probably tinker a little bit too much. Maybe it's time for someone else to have a look at it. Or there'll be a point where your business has grown to such a point that you'll go, well, you know what? I think it's time for a refresh. Maybe I need a new website. Maybe this website now isn't doing everything that I need it to do. You know, previously it was just talking about the products that and what I make, but now I actually want to have an online shop. So it's an iterative process, and it will keep changing. So, on to the fun stuff. Who's got questions, or is everyone like, not quite sure?
I was just interested, I work at Xavier College, and part of, we're about to add a new website, and part of the challenge for us is obviously if we bring in a copywriter to write the website, obviously the copywriter doesn't necessarily know our culture, doesn't know who we are, what we're about necessarily. I'm interested to know how you brief a copywriter and what that process looks like to try and get the best outcome.
That's an awesome question, and I think that's one of the challenges when people engage a copywriter to start with, is realising that part at the beginning is probably the part that takes the longest, and and that's where I said about being able to read minds. It's not just a case of saying, hey, okay, I've signed the contract, just now go and write my website. It is very much a back and forth, and so most copywriters will have quite a detailed briefing document, and it will be a case of sitting down and asking a lot of those questions, really trying to get inside the head of, what would a prospective parent be looking at? Because I think that's, it's being able to convey the culture, but explaining that from the perspective of someone deciding to come to the school and what they would want to find out. Sometimes interviewing parents at the school can be a really useful way to understand how they perceive the school or the sorts of questions that they might ask. Obviously, you've already got lots of other collateral and things like that, so it'd be going through a lot of that and asking. One of the things I do when I do a website is the first draft is what I call a skeleton or an outline draft, and in that it's just trying to work out not just what copy's there, but getting the tone of voice right and really trying to understand how, it is about the culture, but that's where those conversations at the beginning are really important. And sometimes when it's a big organisation like that, it might be a case of sitting down in the round table with a few different people. And I think a school's a really interesting one because you could have kids at different ages, you could have teachers, support staff, management, parents, to get their ideas as well about the school. So it is that iterative process and really taking the time at the beginning. And it's interesting because sometimes people think, oh, well, I've got to send this perfect draft to the website first up. And it's like, that's whenever I do too much in the first stage, it's always when projects go off the rails. So it is about, putting in some copy, asking some questions. Is this how you describe it? Or this is how the school describes it, but what would a parent think about that? And sort of, again, it's a collaborative process. And I think that's probably sometimes where businesses don't realise it's not just an investment in time, investment in finances, it's an investment in time. And having someone who can take the lead from an organisation, and that's probably the other thing I'd say with that is having someone as the one point person. So you can all have your discussions, but when you're sending copy back to a copywriter, it's one voice coming back. And so, I don't think I've really had it, but I've had friends who've had the situation where they get the copy back from the client and there's arguments between staff about how things are described or what's going to be included. So it's about basically having someone who can be your point person who can manage that. But sitting down with a copywriter at the beginning and having those, whether it's workshops, whether it's talking to clients, whether it's talking to prospective clients and using all of that. I look at social media comments, what people have said on that, articles, awards that you've written, things like that can be really useful source of information. Okay, Anita very kindly printed these out for me. So there's a QR code on there and that will take you through to my services page. And if you go to either a website, I've done this with either the website reviews or my copywriting packages. And there's a code there that's valid until the end of next month. So you'll get 10% off. Otherwise, obviously, there is the B2B program, and I'll let Anita talk. I think she's going to talk more about that. So thank you. And of course, if anyone's got any questions, just get in touch either via Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. Send me an email. I'm more than happy to provide some general, I've got a bit of a resources list of things that I can share with you if there's specific questions that you've got. And thank you for coming out this morning.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you.